Garen and a Dragon Named Goose. Chapter 7. Garen closed his eyes as his friend screamed. Maya came to his inner vision, her visage fading as the heat. Hum! Another wave bringing warmth in the flames. Dying felt pleasant, soothing. The wave stopped. Whong! Another came in its place, a deadly rhythm striking to his core. Take me, sweet master of death. Forgive me, Maya. Ah, dragon puke, Sam called. Garen opened one eye in time to see another spewing wave of red light-infused liquid pouring over Forties and splashing onto the boys. The bird did not look happy, its eyes simply wide and staring as it dropped its wings. Tom had the same expression, the goop dripping off his face, soon replaced by another splattering of red and pink liquid. Sam had fared no better, and Tanu was on the floor spread eagle, completely covered in the stuff. Goose heaved again, his claws digging into the deck in front of them. With each spew, he became slightly smaller. Ambient spirit energy, Tom said, amazement in his voice. Goose converted hung. Another wave of dragon puke hit Tom in the face, one particularly jelly-like glop splatting inside his mouth. His face turned green. It feels so good, said Sam, laughing, his spiky hair flattened by the stuff. See, Garen, I told you I'd get you some spirit energy. Hong! Tom tried to stand and escape the next wave, but slipped on the deck, taking Fortis down with him and directly into the next blast of puke. Garen tried to follow and slipped, the world spinning around him. Slowly, he gained a semblance of balance and walked over to Tom, now the only victim of Goose's close-range puking. Tom blinked a few times, searching with his eyes as Garen got him to his feet. Just then, Fortis squawked in panic and flew into the fence, Tom raising his arms as if to shield the bird from the impact. What in the mother's name? Tom gasped. What is it? Sam said, his voice slurring slightly as he picked Tanu from the floor, wiping the goo from his fur and popping a big pink bubble expanding from his nose. Grab Fortis, Sam, and bring him here, Tom said, desperation in his voice as his eyes darted around wildly. Carefully, Sam picked up Fortis and put him in Tom's arms. Tom moved the bird's head to be in line with his own. The eagle's eyes were moving slowly and looking at Garen and Sam, whereas Tom's were still flicking to and fro in odd pattern. I'm seeing through Fortis's eyes, Tom whispered, lifting Fortis to stare at Garen's face. Seeing through his eyes, Sam almost fell over. That's a high-level affinity. You can't possibly be. Hey, who's up there? A light shone through the trees from the pools below. Run! Screamed Sam. Garen grabbed Goose, back to normal size but still heaving, and shoved him in the backpack, goop and all. They threw on their clothes and ran for the gate, Garen and Sam keeping Tom on his feet. Sam, wobbling all over the place, took one step on the first wooden rung on the path, outside the gate, and slipped. Down he went, pulling Garen and Tom with him, tumbling through the bushes and trees, branches whipping in Garen's face. They came to a rest at the bottom of the slope, just before the main wooden deck of the hot springs entrance. Luckily, no one was badly hurt, but Garen had more than a few thorns in his leg. He went too. Wait a second, Sam hissed, pointing with his finger through the bush. 3 men ran up the side path, wearing white overalls that looked nothing like what Sam and Garen had on. The boys waited for them to go out of view and for the light of their glowstones to fade. Quickly, let's go before they come back! They stepped out onto the open deck, half covered in pinkish goo and mud, Tom trying to act normal while holding a shocked-looking Fortis in front of his face, Garen and Sam either side of him. The only person outside the hot spring was an old man with a cane, his back arched in the way most elderly farmers were. He gave a polite nod. He probably couldn't bow any further, which the boys returned, smiling all too widely. Tom almost fell on his face at the effort. They took the stairs a painfully slow and quicking step at a time, casting worried looks all the while behind them. Way, Tom said as they finally reached the bottom, and ran as fast as Tom was able. After a minute, they stopped by some large boulders, panting for air. Sam laughed, sitting on the rock. That was amazing! I feel so good. Garen nodded, his head still feeling dizzy, but in a kind of nice and warm way. Goose was like a heater at his back too, but the dragon's breathing felt regular, and the bag was no longer jolting with his heaves. Garen put down the bag and peered in, Sam and Fortis' face joining him. Goose looked up And if the dragon could smile, Garen thought Goose was managing a small one. He said softly. Garen gave him a rub on the head and closed the flap. It seemed like he was going to be okay. Garen wobbled a bit as he stood up, and surprisingly it was Tom who steadied him. "It's the spirit energy," Tom said, frowning. Or rather, Fortis was frowning. Tom's actual face was as blank as it could be, except for the darting eyes. "On this kind of level, it's the same as getting drunk. Tanu definitely looks worse for wear, don't you, little guy?" Sam laughed as he prodded Tanu in the belly. The Tanuki barely responded, simply holding on to Sam's hair and staring forward. "Is this a joke to you, Sam?" The anger in Tom's voice made Sam drop his smile. "If this doesn't change, I could fail the test." Garen had never seen Tom cry or show any weakness, but in Fortis's eyes, he swore he saw tears forming. Tom turned away. "My house is just up this path. I'll be fine getting home by myself." He stalked off, periodically pointing Fortis's head backwards to check if they were following. At any rate, he seemed to be getting the hang of seeing through the bird. "Come on," Sam Garen said, pulling his friend up from his seated position. "We should get a move on too. Getting to the bridge was much harder than expected. Just walking straight was, but to descend at the same time seemed impossible." The world was moving, Garen was sure. After falling over a few times each, they decided the best thing to do was to walk with their arms draped over the other's shoulder. As they made it to the bridge, Garen's bag started shaking. He quickly took it off and undid the flap. Goose did not look good. "I think he's going to blow again, Garen," Sam said. Garen looked around, the bridge thankfully empty and dark. He took Goose out of the bag and placed him down, gently rubbing his back. Tanu hopped from Sam's shoulder and pulled the dragon's tail out of the way of his face, giving the dragon a little pat as he did. "Oh!" Garen looked away as the jets of dragon puke came out again, although it was soon over this time. He went to pick up Goose when he noticed something odd. "Two tails?" Sam leaned in. "What do you mean, two tails?" Clearly, at Goose's back, another tail was snaking around his own. Sam and Garen followed the scales from Goose's back, along his tail, and then onto the other, until they ended at "Tanu!" They both screamed at the same time. The little Tanuki clearly had a dragon's tail coming out of his bottom. Garen and Sam looked at each other. "Oh, no," Sam said, his eyes wide, the ever-present smile finally fading. It wasn't just Tom and Fortis. Even Tanu seemed confused. He pulled at the tail a few times with his paws, and then, as if made of dust, it just evaporated into golden wisps. The little Tanuki smiled and shrugged. Sam had his head in his hands, and Garen knew exactly what he was thinking. "Sam, you won't fail the test. Even if he did that, I don't think it would count as a fail." "Garen, any affinity not under full control is classed as a—" Sam suddenly stopped, looking out over the bridge. "Oh no, I think we need to go, and fast." From the pool of liquid around Goose, the bridge tiles had begun to glow bright, white around the edges of each fish in the pattern. Then they started to move, wagging their tails. "I've never seen one do that before, Garen," Sam yelled. Grabbing Goose in his arms, Garen began to run, Sam right behind him. The wave of light and moving tile fish rippled along the bridge only a step behind them, lighting up the deck so bright it was like day. They managed to stay ahead of the wave as they got to the end of the bridge, the light rebounding back the other way. Ahead, people were approaching from Ashbridge, the long blue robes of the Aryan military clearly among them. "Sam, what are we going to do?" Garen gasped, out of breath. "I don't know. They must have come from the outpost." Sam looked around frantically. "This way." Sam pulled Garen out of view and down a path headed to Kern Bay. "What are you guys doing?" They both froze. A young and burly man pulling a heavy cart full of hanging fish looked at them quizzically, his dark and bushy eyebrows raised. Then his gaze hardened, his blue eyes seeming to freeze them in place even further. Garen gulped. The man's head was roughly shaven, and all around it were small nicks and scars. On top of his blue and dirty tunic, a spirit stone dangled, dark as night. A spiritless, and not the sort you'd want to meet on a side path this late in the evening, especially one heading to Kern Bay. The young man took one look at the incoming crowd of people from Ashbridge and then the boys, before stopping on the form of Goose in Garen's arms. "Quick, hide behind my cart." The boys didn't need to be told twice. Being seen anywhere near such a commotion would draw away too many questions, and perhaps even tie them to what happened at the hot spring. They scooted around to the rear of the cart. The crowd went by, awed by the spectacle of the bridge, still bright as ever. One of the soldiers, however, stopped, peering down the path. Garen tried to see through the hanging fish. "Did you see what happened?" the soldier asked, pointing a long, narrow-tipped spear towards the young man. Along the wood, a slight glow came. The soldier was serious. "See what? Did something happen, sir? Leave him be. Roden, he's just a spiritless and a damn stinky one at that." Garen and a dragon named Goose, Chapter 7, Part 2. "Don't waste your energy. We have to check the bridge." "Yes, sir." The soldier lowered his spear and walked on. Garen let out the breath he'd been holding. The young cart owner gave a bow to the departing soldier, only turning back to the boys when he was sure they had gone. "Okay then, you two, I think all is clear." Garen and Sam slowly came out from behind the cart, dusting themselves off. "Thanks for that," Garen said. "My pleasure," he said, stretching out a huge hand in greeting. "Name's Dak Arnus, Sam Valar," Sam said, grandly swinging his arms in a mock bow before taking a hand. "And this is my esteemed friend, Garen Sky," Dak said. Garen and Sam looked at each other as Garen took the man's hand. Sam just shrugged, shaking his head. Dak laughed. "Oh, no need to look so serious, Garen. Your bag! It has your brother's name tag on it. Arden was the year above me in lower school. He'd always talk about you." "What?" screamed Sam before Garen could reply. "Year above." He moved his fingers around his hands for far too long. "You're 19. You look at least 25. Dak just smiled, but it was one laden with sorrow. "Guess it's all part of being spiritless." He looked down at Goose in Garen's arms, the dragon somehow sleeping yet again. "I'd heard someone got a dragon, but with how much the military and council has been shutting down talk about it, we didn't know who, or if it was even true." Garen just nodded, not knowing what to say. It just didn't seem right. Dak didn't have a spirit animal at all, and here he was with his dragon. Garen found himself staring at the stone on the young man's chest before realizing what he was doing and looking away. Dak sighed, lifting the stone in his big hands, the chain clinking softly. "This year marks the last year this thing can activate and get me into upper school." He looked at the stone, and as he held it in his hands, began to smile. "Gramps always said to never quit while something is still possible. He made this chain for me, so I can always keep it near, just in case." Sam looked like he was going to cry. "It's a good chain, Dak. A damn good chain, Dak. But enough wallowing around here," Dak said, clapping his hands together. "If you two are going to hang around, help me get this up the slope and to the inn. There's no better customer to be had than a drunkard." Dak moved to the front of the cart and picked up the wooden tongue. Then his nose twitched. "Wait a second. You two smell like rotten fish guts." He looked at them more closely. "What is all the pink stuff anyway?" "Dragon." "Puke," Sam replied, looking down at his tunic as if for the first time. "Don't ask," Garen added, seeing Dak's confused expression. "Oh, I don't want to know. Believe me, but maybe I can help a little." He moved to the back of the cart, heaving out a big container. "Seawater. I use it to wash down the fish if they dry out too much, but let's see if it can get the stink of you two a bit." After spraying down the two boys, it really was amazing how quickly seawater got the stuff out of their clothes and even their hair. Goose and Tanyu took their turns. Goose was by no means happy about it, and even managed to puke all over Dak, who, being spiritless, seemed thankfully immune. After the cleaning, Goose nestled up into the bag and went soundly to sleep. Tanu, on the other hand, was completely revived, and back to his usual smiling self, no extra appendages to be seen. Smells gone and feeling fresh, they heaved the cart up the sandy path together and into the main square. Most of the other carts still around lay boarded up, aside from one selling roasted chicken legs and another steaming hot drinks. Looking over to the bridge, they were relieved to see nothing but a dark shadow. "Thanks again, Dak," Garen said as they moved to bid farewell. "You really saved us back there." "It was my pleasure, truly," Dak smiled. "Here, take these with you. I think you need them more than me." He passed 2 sticks of skewered fish, thanks to the boys. Garen took a bite. It was salty and juicy, and the texture was sublime. "This is delicious, Dak," Sam said, taking 2 chunks in a single bite. "Can I take another for my mum?" Dak laughed, passing him another. "When you two become big-shot mages, make sure you pay me back, you hear?" Giving their thanks again, they made their way over to the inn, looking almost respectful and walking a lot steadier, but Sam's look darkened the moment he finished his food. "Garen, do you think Tom will be all right?" he said, looking over to him with those big blue eyes of his. Sam could never hide his emotion. He wore his heart on his sleeve, and right now his eyes showed more than a hint of worry. "I hope so, Sam. I think it'll wear off by morning. It's Tom after all." That seemed to help. "Yeah, you're right. It's Tom. He'll be good as new in the morning. I'm sure Tiny will be fine too," Garen added. Sam just nodded, and then yawned, passing Tanu to Garen. "I'll go in and get Arden for you, and then I'm hitting the hay." A few moments later, out came Arden with Sam propping him up. Barely. Mayo was in tow behind them. By the looks of it, if Garen and Sam had been feeling drunk, then Arden was completely wasted. He was stumbling everywhere, his face flushed red, his collar undone down to his chest. Even other drunks paused to tuck their chairs in as he came by. "And a fistful of mana, drive it to the bone. Mido trees will call us home." Arden droned. No one would call it singing. While pumping a fist in the air, Maya gave Garen a worried look as they came to him. "Those aren't even the words, Garen," she said, face in her hand. "Drinking games with the Midorian soldiers. And I won!" Arden shouted, fist still raised above his head. Maya shook her head while he wasn't looking. "How did you two get on?" she asked, her green eyes inquisitive. "Oh, just great, thanks," Garen managed, trying to avoid her tough stare. As expected, added Sam, grabbing Tanu from his perch on Garen's shoulder. "Well," said Maya, frowning slightly as she looked at Garen, "you best get Arden home, Garen. And Sam," she said, turning to the smaller boy, "you can come into the inn and tell Bambo and I exactly what went as expected." Sam groaned, but gave a small wave to Garen as he followed Maya into the inn. Garen watched them go, slightly disappointed Maya hadn't even said goodbye to him. Before he could wallow any further in self-pity, Arden slumped heavily onto him. Fists of mana, dogs and roads. "By the mother! Arden, pack it in." He propped his brother back up straight. "Let's just get you home. It's a long walk back and you can't really walk at all." "Oh no, brother. We aren't walking tonight. Follow me." Somehow, Arden managed to walk ahead, albeit in a stumbling, river-like pattern. Around the back of the inn they went. About 50 paces along a small path, Garen saw what Arden had planned. The stones, 3 boulders, sat in smooth wells of volcanic rock, each in their own curved track. "Brother, come on. I've used these many times and," he burped loudly, "I've got more than enough energy reserves for the both of us." Garen shook his head. He'd rode on his father's back when he was a child, but never since. Not only were they slow and expensive, but the track they went along didn't even save them that much walking time. But Arden wasn't to be dissuaded. Onto one of the smooth boulders he hopped, about as large as a ball, and after almost slipping off, got his grip, the boulder rising softly off the track. "Come on, brother, help on the one next to me." "I'll charge it up." Garen sighed and moved over to the boulder. As he went to climb on, his backpack stirred, a bustling movement, Goose trying desperately to get out of the bag. Huon, Garen knew the sound all too well now, and turned to see Arden and his boulder take it all. "What in the mother's name, bro?" Garen had never seen the stones move so fast. One moment Arden was there, the next he was somewhere in the near distance, only his wailing voice trailing behind him. Slowly, Garen backed away from his boulder. Tonight, he'd be walking home.